I didn't know my life had a ranking system until my mother said it out loud at dinner. Not during a fight, not in anger, not even with emotion. She said it the same way someone states a fact they believe everyone already understands. Your brother's family comes first. You're more flexible. You'll be fine. My father nodded. Once. Slow. Like this wasn't cruel, just practical. My sister-in-law kept eating. My brother didn't look up from his plate. The room stayed quiet. No raised voices, no slammed hands, no dramatic pause. Just the sound of forks scraping porcelain and the soft hum of the kitchen light above us. I remember noticing how calm everyone looked. Comfortable. Relieved almost. Like something that had always existed had finally been said out loud. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I didn't feel sad either. What I felt was clear. A strange, clean kind of clarity. So I nodded once and said, "Okay, I hear you." The words landed heavier than I expected. My mother blinked like she was waiting for more. An argument, a protest, a plea. My father shifted in his chair. No one spoke, and that was it. Dinner continued. Someone passed the salt. Someone asked about traffic. Someone laughed at something on their phone, as if nothing important had just happened. But something had. Not inside them. Inside me, because in that moment something didn't break. It disconnected. Growing up, no one ever explained my role to me. They didn't need to. It was taught in patterns, in who plans revolved around, in who emergencies belonged to, in whose problems became family problems and who stayed private. My brother had a way of pulling gravity toward him. If something went wrong, it was urgent. If something went right, it was celebrated loudly. When something went wrong for me, it was handled quietly. I was described with words people think are compliments. Independent. Strong. Low maintenance. I learned early that those words come with a cost. They mean don't ask, don't need, don't interrupt. So I didn't. I paid my own way through school. I moved cities alone. I figured things out without calling home. And every time I succeeded, it confirmed what they already believed. She's fine. She doesn't need us. Over time, being fine became my job. I didn't realize how permanent that role was until that dinner. Until my mother said it like a rule she assumed I'd agreed to. Your brother's family comes first. You're flexible. You'll be fine. What stayed with me wasn't the sentence itself. It was the ease of it. The comfort. The way no one checked my face to see if it hurt. That's when I understood something important. They weren't choosing him over me in that moment. They had been choosing him over me for years. This was just the first time they said it out loud. Later that night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the moment. Not to feel sorry for myself, but to understand it. I realized I'd spent my life acting like a buffer, absorbing stress, absorbing inconvenience, absorbing responsibility, smoothing things over so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. And the scariest part, they didn't even see it as taking from me. They saw it as how things worked. That's when the thought crossed my mind, quiet but undeniable. If I stopped filling the gap, what would happen? At the time, I didn't know the answer. I didn't know how fast they'd notice. I didn't know how expensive that sentence would become. All I knew was this. I had just been told exactly where I stood. And for the first time in my life, I believed them. I didn't realize then that those 6 calm words at the dinner table were the beginning of the end. I just knew one thing for sure. That sentence didn't change who they were. It changed what I was willing to be. And I had no idea yet that it would cost them everything. After that night, the memory didn't fade. It rewound. Over and over. And the more I replayed it, the more I realized it wasn't new at all. It was familiar. That sentence didn't create my position in the family. It just named it. Growing up, I was always called the easy one. Low maintenance, independent, mature for my age. Adults said it like praise. Teachers repeated it. My parents leaned on it. And I learned very quickly what that label really meant. It meant I didn't interrupt. I didn't cry for long. I didn't ask twice. If I needed something, I figured it out quietly. If I didn't get something, I told myself I hadn't really needed it anyway. Mark, on the other hand, was never easy. He was loud when he was happy, explosive when he was stressed, restless, impulsive, always on the edge of some new plan or problem. When Mark struggled, the house shifted. Schedules changed. Voices softened. Money appeared from places I didn't know existed. When Mark failed a class, there were meetings and tutors. When I struggled, I stayed up later and fixed it myself. When Mark broke something, it was an accident. When I did, it was carelessness. No one ever said it directly. That's the part people don't understand. Favoritism doesn't always come with cruelty. Sometimes it comes with attention and absence. I learned early that if I stayed quiet, things went smoother. Dinner stayed calmer. My parents slept better. Mark didn't spiral. Silence became a skill. I remember one night in middle school, I had a fever. Nothing dramatic. Just enough that my head felt heavy and my body ached. I sat on the edge of my bed, debating whether to say something. Down the hall, Mark was yelling. He'd crashed the car. Not badly, but badly enough. Doors slammed, voices rose. I lay back down and pulled the blanket over my shoulders. No one checked on me, not because they didn't care, but because there was always something louder. I learned to measure my needs against the room. If Mark was having a crisis, mine disappeared. If he needed help, I waited. If he needed money, I adjusted my expectations. Over time, it stopped feeling like sacrifice. It felt like logic. I told myself I was stronger, more capable, more adaptable. And every time I swallowed something I wanted to say, I was rewarded. Less tension, less conflict, more peace, at least on the surface. When I did speak up, even gently, it surprised them. My mother would pause like she was recalibrating. "Oh, I didn't know you needed that." My father would say things like, "You've always been so good at handling things," which sounded like trust, but felt like dismissal. Mark never had to earn attention. I earned mine by not asking for it. As we got older, the pattern solidified. Mark moved back home twice. I never did. Mark borrowed money with vague promises. I budgeted and planned. Mark made choices that created emergencies. I avoided choices that might. And slowly, quietly, I became the one everyone relied on without ever really seeing. When relatives visited, they asked Mark how he was doing. When they asked about me, it was always the same response. "She's good." I became good by default. No details required. What no one noticed was how early I learned to disappear. How I learned to stay agreeable, so I wouldn't become a problem. How I learned that being easy meant being invisible. And the thing about invisibility is this: it feels safe, at first. No one criticizes what they don't notice. No one argues with someone who doesn't demand. But safety has a price. Because when you don't take up space, people forget you exist there. By the time we were adults, the roles were locked in. Mark was the one who needed help. I was the one who could handle things. Mark's chaos was met with rescue. My stability was met with expectation. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing that as unfair. I saw it as normal. I learned early what silence could buy me. Silence didn't just buy me peace. It bought me a reputation. By the time I left home, everyone agreed on who I was. Reliable, capable, the one who would be fine no matter what. At first, that felt like freedom. I paid my way through school without asking for help, worked 2 jobs, lived with roommates I barely knew, learned how to stretch a paycheck and still show up looking put together. When things got hard, I didn't call home. Not because I was proud, because I already knew the answer. "You've got this." "You always do." And I did. Every time I landed on my feet, it reinforced something dangerous. My independence stopped being respected. It started being used. It began small. A quick text from my mom asking if I could help Mark just this once. A casual comment about how tight things were said, like an observation, not a request. A forwarded message from Mark with a smiley face and no context. I never heard the words, "Can you help?" I heard expectations disguised as updates, and I filled the gaps without thinking. Money here, time there, listening, calming, explaining things I hadn't caused. I became the person everyone vented to and leaned on, the buffer between chaos and consequences. When Mark was overwhelmed, I talked him down. When my parents were anxious, I reassured them. When Emily needed support, I listened. No one asked how much it cost me, because I never showed the bill. What I didn't see at first was how predictable it became. If something went wrong, someone would message me, not urgently, casually, as if my life were always on standby. I kept my schedule flexible without realizing it. I didn't commit too far ahead. I left margins everywhere, just in case. Just in case meant just for them. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the emotional labor. Being the calm voice, the reasonable one, the translator when feelings got messy. I carried everyone else's stress so they wouldn't have to, and because I carried it well, they assumed it weighed nothing. Then one afternoon, something shifted. I was at work finishing a meeting when my phone lit up. My mom. No message, just a missed call. A few minutes later, a text. "Call me when you can." I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. The reflex, drop everything, fix it, be available. I picked up my phone, and then I didn't. I set it face down on my desk. I finished my coffee. I answered emails. I did my job. For the first time, I didn't respond right away. It felt wrong, like I was breaking a rule I'd agreed to without remembering when. I kept waiting for something to happen, for another call, for panic, for the situation to escalate. It didn't. An hour passed, then two. Finally, another text came through. "Are you okay? You've been quiet." That's when it hit me. The world hadn't collapsed. No emergency had exploded because I wasn't immediately available. Nothing had actually required me. I realized how much of my life had been built around being ready for someone else's crisis, and how little of it had been built around my own. That moment didn't feel empowering. It felt unsettling. Because if I wasn't needed in the way I'd been told I was, then what had I been giving up all that time? That was the day I started paying attention to how often I said yes without thinking, to how quickly I put myself second, to how easily my independence had turned into an open door. I had spent years proving I could stand on my own, and without meaning to, I taught them they could lean on me forever. The truth settled in slowly. Being strong hadn't protected me. It had made me convenient, and once I saw that I couldn't unsee it, once I noticed it, the pattern didn't take long to prove itself. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, middle of the workday. No context, just urgency. My phone rang, rang again. Then a voicemail. My mother's voice was tight controlled in that way that meant she was holding something together with effort. "Call me as soon as you can." No explanation. No details. I stared at my screen longer than I needed to. When families say things without saying them, you learn to translate. Urgent with no details means money. Money with no details means trouble. I called back. "We need to talk," she said immediately. "Can you come home this weekend?" Home. She hadn't used that word in years. I asked what was wrong. There was a pause. "It's just a lot right now." That was all she gave me. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I booked a flight. By the time I arrived, I already knew what I'd find. The house looked the same from the outside. Same driveway, same porch light. But when I walked in, the air felt different. Heavy. Stale. The dining table was covered. Not with food, with paper. Stacks of envelopes. Bills. Notices. Documents spread out like someone had tried to make sense of chaos by giving it space. My parents were already there. My father stood near the window, staring outside without seeing anything. My mother sat at the table, hands folded too tightly in her lap. Mark and Emily were on the couch, close together, rigid. Emily's eyes were red. Mark kept rubbing his hands over his face like he was trying to wake himself up. No one asked how my flight was. No one said they were glad to see me. They didn't need to. I was already where I was expected to be. My mother started talking before I could sit down, fast, careful, words stacked on top of each other, a business opportunity, some delays, payments that didn't come through on time. Temporary. Just temporary. She kept saying that word. Temporary. Like repetition could make it true. My father jumped in with the numbers that didn't quite line up. Mark added pieces apologetic, but vague. Emily nodded silently, tears slipping down her cheeks. I listened. Hands folded. Face neutral. The way I always had. No one asked what I thought. They didn't need to. They weren't explaining this to inform me. They were explaining it to prepare me. Eventually the words slowed. The room went quiet. That quiet. The kind that waits. My father cleared his throat. You're in a stable position, he said. You don't have kids. You've always been careful. There it was, the math. My mother looked at me, eyes searching my face. You handle things so well, she said softly. We just need help getting through this part. Mark finally looked up. For a split second, I saw it. Not confidence. Relief. Like the answer had walked in the door. I realized something then. They weren't asking if I could help. They were deciding how much. I felt the familiar pull to step forward. To ask what they needed. To calculate. To absorb. But something in me stayed still. I thought about the missed calls, the assumptions, the years of being fine. I thought about how calm they'd been at that dinner, how easily they'd placed me last. So instead of saying yes, I asked a question I had never asked before. What's the plan if I don't? The silence that followed was different. Sharp. My mother's face fell. My father looked confused, almost offended. Emily's breathing quickened. Mark stared at me like I'd spoken another language. No one answered. Because the truth was simple. There was no plan. There had never been one. They had built this entire moment around the assumption that I would catch them. I told them I needed time to understand everything. They nodded too quickly, grateful, certain. They thought time meant I was deciding how much to give. They didn't realize I was deciding whether I would at all. That night in my childhood bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I could hear my parents whispering down the hall, hear Mark pacing, hear Emily crying quietly. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing it. I felt something else. A question forming, slow, clear, unavoidable. What if I said no? I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of the noise in the house, but because my mind wouldn't slow down. That question kept circling. What if I said no? By morning, the house felt suspended. Everyone was polite, careful, like they were afraid to say the wrong thing and scare me off. My mother asked if I wanted coffee. My father commented on the weather. No one mentioned the table full of paper. That's when Rachel showed up. My aunt, my mother's older sister. She knocked once and walked in like she always had, carrying the calm of someone who wasn't panicking yet. She looked around the room at the quiet, at the tension, at the stacks of envelopes. Then she looked at me, and she knew. She didn't say anything at first, just hugged my mother, nodded at my father, gave Mark and Emily a tight smile. Then she touched my elbow lightly. "Come outside with me," she said. Not a question. We stepped onto the back porch. The morning air was cool, clear, the kind of quiet you don't get inside a house full of expectations. She leaned against the railing and took a slow breath. "I saw the look on your face last night," she said. "I remember it." That got my attention. She turned to me, then eyes steady. "They did this to me too." The words landed gently, not dramatic, not bitter, just true. I didn't know what to say. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Years ago," she continued, It was your uncle. His business. His mess. She paused. I was the one who didn't have kids, the one with the stable job, the one who could help. The pattern tightened in my chest. She told me how it started. A loan that wasn't really a loan, promises that were more hope than plan, gratitude that faded quickly. I thought I was helping them get back on their feet, she said. I didn't realize I was teaching them where to land. She looked back toward the house. I paid off one crisis, she said, and suddenly every crisis was mine. I asked her how it ended. She laughed softly. It didn't, she said. Not until I stopped. There was no anger in her voice, just clarity. Then she said the thing I didn't know I needed to hear. If you save them once, she said you'll finance them forever. I felt my throat tighten. She reached out and squeezed my hand. They don't mean to do it, she added, but they will. Because it works. I asked her why she never told me before. She shrugged. You weren't ready to hear it, she said, and I wasn't ready to admit it. We stood there for a moment, the quiet settling between us. Inside the house, I could hear movement, chairs shifting, voices lowering when someone walked by. Rachel straightened and looked at me. You're not cruel for asking questions, she said. You're not selfish for wanting terms. She met my eyes. And you're not responsible for saving people from patterns they refuse to change. Before we went back inside, she said one last thing. Whatever you decide, she said, make sure it's something you can live with even when they're disappointed. Then she opened the door and stepped back into the house. I stayed on the porch a moment longer, breathing, listening. For the first time, I could see the pattern clearly, and once you see it, you can't pretend it isn't there. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: if I stepped in again without boundaries, I wouldn't just be helping them. I'd be teaching them exactly how to use me. I went back inside with a different posture. Not defensive, not apologetic, clear. They were already waiting. My parents sat at the table again, papers neatly stacked now, like organization alone might impress me. Mark and Emily sat side by side, hands linked, eyes tired. No one spoke at first. They were waiting for reassurance, for numbers, for relief. Instead, I sat down and placed a folder on the table. It wasn't thick, but it was heavy. This is what I'm willing to do, I said. And this is how. My father reached for the folder immediately. My mother leaned in. Mark's shoulders relaxed just slightly. They assumed the worst part was over. My father flipped through the first page, then the second. His expression changed. This is a loan, he said. Yes, I replied. Not a gift. The room shifted. Emily's hand tightened around Mark's. My mother's smile faltered. I kept going. This wouldn't be cash handed over, I said. It would be a controlled trust loan. They stared at me. I explained calmly. Full financial transparency. Every account, every liability, no more vague explanations. Asset liquidation comes first. Anything non-essential gets sold before a dollar moves. Therapy is mandatory, not suggested, required, and everything is documented. Legally binding, with accountability, no assumptions, no open-ended support, no quiet expectations. My mother shook her head slowly. Why are you doing this to us? She asked. The question was sharp-wounded. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not doing this to you, I said. I'm doing this so it doesn't happen again. My father pushed the folder away slightly. This feels extreme, he said. Cold, Mark finally spoke. You don't trust us, I met his eyes. I trust patterns, I said. And this one has been running my entire life. Emily's eyes filled with tears. We're family, she said, softly. This shouldn't feel like a contract. I nodded. When I was emotional support, I said I was family. When I was the backup plan, I continued, I was infrastructure. No one spoke. I could feel the room recalibrating around me. My mother reached for my hand. We didn't realize you felt this way. I pulled my hand back gently. You did? I said. You just didn't think it would change anything. My father stared down at the paperwork. So what happens if we say no? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Then I don't step in. That landed hard. Mark's head snapped up. Emily inhaled sharply. You'd let us fail, Mark asked. I shook my head. I'd let you face the consequences, I said. There's a difference. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was fear, because for the first time the safety net had conditions, and for the first time I wasn't negotiating them. I closed the folder and slid it back toward them. You don't have to decide right now, I said. But understand this. This is help, I said evenly, not rescue. And if you want rescue, I continued, you'll have to look somewhere else. No one moved. No one argued. They were staring at the reality I had finally put into words. I stood up slowly. Take the day, I said. I'll come back tomorrow. As I walked away, I didn't feel powerful. I felt steady, because for the first time the terms were clear. And whatever happened next, I wasn't going to disappear to make it easier for them. They signed the papers the next day. No speeches, no apologies wrapped in explanations. Just tired faces and shaky hands. My father signed first. Then my mother. Mark hesitated, then followed. Emily, last wiping her eyes before the pen touched paper. Relief washed through the room. I could feel it. Like they believed the danger had passed. I didn't correct them. For the first few weeks, things were quiet. Almost cooperative. Documents were shared. Accounts were opened. Receipts were uploaded. They attended therapy. Awkwardly, defensively, but they showed up. They sold a few things they'd been avoiding. Canceled subscriptions they claimed they needed. Adjusted just enough. Every update came with a tone of performance. See, we're trying. See, we're changing. I didn't praise them. I didn't criticize them. I just tracked. 3 months passed. That's how long it took. I didn't find out because someone confessed. I found out because numbers don't lie. A flagged transaction. A new account that hadn't been disclosed. A purchase that violated the agreement. Not catastrophic. Careless. Familiar. Mark had taken on a new financial commitment. No discussion. No approval. Exactly what the agreement forbade. I sat at my desk staring at the screen. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Disappointment. Because this was the moment every part of my past had been training me for. The part where I was supposed to soften it. Call first. Warn them. Give them time to fix it. That's what the old version of me would have done. So they wouldn't panic. So they wouldn't be mad. So they wouldn't feel consequences too sharply. I didn't do that. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't give a heads up. I activated the clause. Exactly as written. The process moved quickly. Funds were frozen. Oversight shifted. Protections triggered. No drama. Just execution. The call came an hour later. My phone lit up with my mother's name, then my father's, then Mark, then Emily. I didn't answer, not right away. I let the silence do what it was designed to do. When I finally picked up, my mother was crying. You could have warned us, she said. Her voice was shaking. This feels cruel. I stayed calm. It was explained, I said. It was signed. My father got on the line. This was a mistake, he said quickly. We were just trying to stabilize. I listened. Then I said the sentence that changed everything. This is the consequence. The line went quiet. Mark's voice came next. Tight. Angry. You set us up, he said. I almost laughed. No, I replied. I told you exactly how this would work. Emily started crying in the background. We thought you'd talk to us first, she said. You always do. There it was, the assumption, the expectation, the pattern. I took a breath. That's why this clause exists, I said. So no one has to guess what happens next. They accused me of being harsh, of turning family into a transaction, of choosing rules over relationships. I didn't argue because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a test. And they had failed it. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to repair the damage they'd caused. I didn't take responsibility for their panic. I let the system I'd put in place hold. The calls kept coming, voicemails stacked up, some angry, some pleading, some apologetic. I listened to none of them. Not because I didn't care, because caring didn't mean undoing the boundary. That was the moment it became real. Not to them, to me. I finally understood something I'd avoided my whole life. Boundaries only matter when you're willing to enforce them, even when it hurts. Especially then. And once I crossed that line, there was no going back. Because the version of me they were used to, the one who warned them, the one who softened consequences, she was gone. After that, everything slowed down, not because things got easier, because there was nowhere left to run. Without the safety net, reality moved in. Quietly, relentlessly. Mark was the first to feel it. The extra car went up for sale. Then the equipment he'd sworn was essential. Then pieces of a lifestyle he'd built on the assumption that someone else would catch him. Each sale was framed as temporary, just until things stabilized. But this time there was no one nodding along, no one filling the gap. My parents tried to control the story at first. They told relatives it was a misunderstanding, that paperwork had gotten complicated, that I was being overly cautious. They spoke carefully, they left out details. But narratives only work when someone is propping them up. I wasn't. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I stayed silent. And without my silence doing the work, it used to their version of events collapsed under its own weight. Questions started coming from places they hadn't expected. Why were assets being sold? Why was Mark downsizing? Why did things suddenly look different? There was no villain to point to, just consequences. The house felt different when I visited. Smaller, quieter. My parents spoke more cautiously, like they weren't sure which words would still work on me. They no longer spoke for me. They couldn't. For the first time, they didn't control the narrative. They were inside it. Mark avoided me at first. Then he tried anger, accusations, blame. Claims that I'd gone too far. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I let the silence answer for me. Emily was the one who broke. She called late one night. Her voice was soft, careful. She didn't start with excuses. She said my name. Then she said she was sorry. Not the vague kind, the kind that acknowledges impact. She told me she hadn't understood how much I'd been carrying. How easy it had been to assume I'd always step in. She said she was scared, that everything felt unstable. She asked if there was anything I could do. I listened. I really listened. Then I told her the truth. I can't fix this for you, I said. But I hope you find a way to fix it yourselves. She cried. I didn't rush to fill the space. That was new, for both of us. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from guilt, from restraint. Because every instinct I had told me to soften it, to offer something, anything. I didn't, and the world didn't end. Days turned into weeks. The panic faded into effort. Mark learned how heavy his choices were without someone else carrying them. My parents learned what it felt like to sit with uncertainty instead of handing it off. And I learned something unexpected. Silence wasn't just a survival skill. It was power, not loud, not cruel, just steady. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was watching. And that more than anything, I could have said changed the balance between us. After everything settled, I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. What I felt was space. Quiet space. The kind you don't realize you've been missing until your chest isn't tight all the time. I went back to therapy. not to talk about them, to talk about me, about why being needed had felt safer than being known, about how silence had protected me and trapped me at the same time. Distance helped too, not dramatic distance, just enough, fewer visits, shorter calls, more time between responses. Time I used to sit with my own life instead of waiting for someone else's problem to arrive. Something shifted slowly, subtly. My parents started asking different questions. Not what I could do, not what I thought they should do, but how I was doing. At first it sounded rehearsed, awkward, like a language they were learning late. "How's work? Are you sleeping okay?" "What have you been up to?" I answered honestly. And for the first time, they listened without redirecting. There were no big apologies, no dramatic breakthroughs, just small corrections, consistent ones. Mark stopped calling unless there was a reason, a real one. Emily stopped hinting. She spoke plainly, and when I said no, the world stayed intact. That was the strangest part. Nothing fell apart because I chose myself. Back in my own place, in my own routine, I noticed how much lighter my life felt. I slept better. I made plans without contingency clauses. I stopped bracing every time my phone buzzed. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I had already chosen myself. For a long time, I believed being last in my family meant I needed to try harder, be quieter, give more, prove my value. I was wrong. Being last wasn't a position. It was a warning label. It was telling me that no matter how much I gave, the line would never move. So I stepped out of it and built a life where my worth wasn't measured by how much I could absorb. If any part of this story feels familiar, if you've ever been the one who was fine, so everyone else could fall apart safely, you're not alone. And you're not selfish for wanting more. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from, and whether you've ever had to step out of a role you never agreed to play. Our channel shares new stories every day. If these stories help you breathe a little easier, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one.